Hello, faithful audience, and welcome to another edition of Nerd Teachers Anonymous. I'm Mr. D here with my co-host, Mr. G, and
Good to
we are
see you.
back. Oh, Dad, good to see you too, my friend. And I'm excited to be talking about season three of Star Trek Picard with you. Um, Before we get into season three, and I know we got a deadline. It's a tough time of year for teachers. Progress reports around the corner.
Yes, they are.
Um, so before we, get too far off and into that discussion, I just want to say thank you to all those listeners who got us 500 plus hits on our Avatar conversation.
Hmm.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah.
If you like this discussion of Star Trek, let us know in that comment section. Hit up those likes, and we could probably take on season three if there's an audience for it out there. So just thank you again for that, and Mr. G, without further ado, you want to talk a little bit our format and launch in, as it were?
Oh sure. So we're actually recording this during a snow day for our listeners. One of the biggest snow days in recent memory here where we live. And it took me 3 times as long as it should have to get home last night. And when I walked into the door, I got a text message from you, Mr. D, saying, "Do you want to talk about Star Trek Picard?" And I went, you know
Nice.
what? Yeah, let's do that. So, with that said, this is what we're going to be talking about. As of this recording, we have 2 episodes that have come out, The Next Generation and Disengage. So, we're going to be focusing on the strengths and struggles of both those episodes together as one narrative, because for better or worse, that seems to be the case right now, in which they're not completely self contained episodes, but they kind of bleed into each other. So grouping both episodes as one narrative seems to be appropriate here. And I will start off with the strengths, and we will hand this over to you for your thoughts on the strengths of the show, then struggles. And there's kind of a Kobayashi Maru scenario I've noticed for Star Trek
Mm,
fans right now, regarding
hmm
how to handle the show. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that. So with that said, biggest, the absolute biggest strength for me regarding these first 2 episodes is this is very clearly a course correction in tone.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. There was a point in this age of new Trek where I seriously considered giving up my fandom, which is
That's
absolutely
intense,
in
Doug.
it is intense because Star Trek plays such a major part in my life. As a person on the spectrum, it helped make me verbal in a time where I could not communicate otherwise. I love Star Trek, but with especially the ending of Star Trek Picard season 2, I just went, it's not worth it anymore. I do not want to get involved in these materials anymore. Next Gen will always be there, no matter how badly they pollute the canon. Next Generation and the shows that played such a role in my development, those will always be there, but I don't want to pursue any new Trek. And this kind of started with Discovery, and its tone is anything but Star Trek. I really attribute it to a sort of Game of Thrones kind of mentality, especially at the end there, the end of
Or kind
season
of
one.
Born Identity too,
Oh
meets
yeah,
Game of Thrones. I feel like, yeah.
definitely anything but Star Trek. And I abandoned Discovery after season 2. Picard, that is to say, the show, we have to specify for people who don't know that Picard is the name of a show. I have an extremely dysfunctional relationship with this show. It gives me hope, but then it makes me hate Star Trek at the end of it. Every season is like that. First season, it was great to see Picard again, Patrick Stewart after almost 20 years, but he's doing things that are absolutely terrible. Um, so season 1 was soul crushingly depressing. Season 2 started out strong. I thought we would. I thought a course correction had been made, which is why I'm a little wary of where we are right now, because I
Yep.
was saying the exact same thing about season 2,
Absolutely.
and it gutted me at the end. Entire pillars of the next generation completely destroyed at the end of that season, specifically Q. They did Q so dirty in
Mm,
that show.
Mm.
And at that point, I was done. I just wanted to be done with Star Trek. But a colleague of ours, Mr. S, really encouraged me to watch Lower Decks. So we had another snow day. We had a snow day this time last year, and I decided to binge watch Lower Decks last year. And the first season was decent. I watched the first season, but it really speaks to the health of a franchise when its strongest entry is a parody.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
So, but then Strange New Worlds. Yes, sir.
No, no, finish with that. I just want to kind of talk about, while you're on this wavelength, you kind of where we are with the franchise. If I could just add one thing,
Go
please
right
finish your
ahead,
thought.
buddy. Go
Oh,
go right
okay.
ahead.
You're describing like your feeling of when when Trek is kind of becomes soured or when it's rough or hard to take the franchise seriously. You always have what's behind and that you can't really do anything, you can't change that. But it's like you don't have too much to look forward to ahead. To be honest, that happened to me when I saw Star Trek. I can't even think of the name of it. Yes, I just thought of it, Generations. And the Enterprise
Mm.
D was destroyed by Ursa Vitor, because they hijacked Geordi and they guessed the shield frequency. It's like, oh my goodness, that's what it took the whole time to take that down.
But
I
they
love that ship.
do.
I love that ship, and dang.
Oh yeah.
So I've been kind of distant for a minute, but I'm sorry you're going through that right now. That's not cool.
But yeah, the it's funny you bring up the crashing of the Enterprise D because they do make a
Yeah,
subtle diss
yeah,
at that in
yeah.
episodes 1 and 2, which I did appreciate. So that's rock bottom. This is the point where I'm like, I'm done. I canceled Paramount Plus the second time. I'm on my
Mm-hmm.
third
Mm-hmm.
iteration of Paramount Plus right now. But the biggest step in the right direction is not Star Trek Picard, and I've said this before, but Star Trek Strange New Worlds.
Mm.
That is basically the anti-Discovery. Um, it's a slow return to form. You got self-contained episodes like the original series. You have character-based stories. They do more with their characters in a 5-minute scene on Strange New Worlds than Discovery does in 5 seasons. And I know last we spoke on that topic, I know you hadn't seen Strange New Worlds. We could do an episode on that if you folks are interested. But it's you got a positive tone, very optimistic for the most part. The canon abuse is definitely an issue, but I can forgive that because the stories are generally more optimistic, more compelling, and at the end of the episode, I feel better for having watched them than
Yeah.
before, which I could not say for Discovery, and I dang sure couldn't say for the first 2 seasons of Picard. Um, Season 3 builds on this momentum and improves it even further. With that in mind, it's all about improvement, I've noticed. The theme to these 2 episodes in particular is about improvement, both for the show itself and the broader franchise, I've noticed.
Mm.
So, with that said, what are your thoughts? You said you were kind of distancing yourself from Trek after Generations. What are your thoughts on Discovery? And have you seen Lower Decks or anything like that?
Okay, so as far as franchise goes, I am up to date on Kelvin movies. I've seen 2 seasons of Discovery, and I've not seen any Lower Decks or Strange New Worlds, or I think there's is there another
Mhm.
animated one?
Yep.
An additional animated one? What's that one called?
It's called Prodigy. I get the impression it's for the
Oh,
younger crowd.
okay.
It's
No,
on
I don't know.
Nickelodeon.
And I my whole thing was like, there's so much TNG and there's so much Deep Space Nine. I was rewatching Deep Space Nine to, in preparation for our discussion because there's only so much Star Trek Picard you can rewatch. So there's so much awesome stuff out there. So when I just kind of living in that, letterbox, non-widescreen world of Trek that's brightly lit and, optimistic. Not all episodes have to leave you with that rosy feeling, but overall, you'd want to live in that world of the Federation. At least I would
Oh
want
yeah.
to. Like, there's some low points in Deep Space Nine and even in TNG, and some really tough and questionable decisions in Voyager. But
Yeah.
overall, and then like I say, yeah, I'd want to live in those spaces. Discovery. Okay, sorry to get back to present day Trek. My only problem with Discovery is like I liked this crew, and the moment I have this feeling about a show or a film, it just kills it for me. And that is, if I could have this budget and this crew, and I truly believe I could do a better job than this person, I can't
Hmm.
watch it anymore. Those actors are so awesome.
Yep.
I mean, we've got I mean, it's such an amazing cast and a great budget, and I don't care about the 3D and not being consistent with the original series. We're never going back to buttons and knobs, but arg, I kind of felt that same way with Logan, that film with Patrick Stewart in
Oh,
it,
right.
the X-Men film that was Hugh Jackman's kind of send off. I don't always feel that way. I don't want to like come across as like a heavy, a humongous ego. So far, I feel like episode one is in the right hands. Two, maybe I could have done something a little different, but I don't have that feeling yet. I don't have the feeling like give me the reins. And before watching season one and two of Picard, I didn't want it. It's
Hmm.
like if they came to me and said, "Here you go, Brian. Sorry, here you go, Mr. T." It just broke my character right there. I'm so passionate about this. I'd be like, no, no, I don't think I can help you. So yeah, it's like this distance of do I want to be involved in the project? That's a tough thing because then that's just where my brain goes and I write fan fiction. So I can't keep getting into new Trek for that reason.
That's where you and I differ because Picard frustrated me so much where because it was released during the pandemic, I literally rewrote all the episodes because what the heck else am I going to do? It's the pandemic. I did that and worked out, and those are my two coping mechanisms for the whole that whole 2 years that we were teaching from computer.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but same impression, different application, perhaps. So, with that said, as I mentioned earlier, the theme I'm getting from season three of Picard is improvement. And I'm going to start with the context of the show itself. You start caring about the new characters. There weren't many who carried over, but the one that I was really nervous about was Raffi.
Mm,
Um, but her improvement as a character is the best example of this theme because the first two seasons, it's very difficult to call her a character because in the first season, she's kind of like a sidekick and tried to make JL happen. God, I hated that. Where she tried to call Picard JL, thinking it was hip and whatever. And then season two, especially, she had no consistency as a character. She was literally a plot device. Whatever the plot needed her to be, she did, and there was no consistency, no struggle, no personality. So I got really nervous in that first episode
mm,
where she shows up and looks like she had fallen off the wagon, so to speak, and was buying drugs. And then you realize at the end of that episode, or rather the end of the scene, what that was for. And that's when I went, okay, this is interesting. And she really comes into her own in a sort of, since you're a DS9 fan too, it's almost a DS9 sort of way because everybody says, well, how can you criticize Discovery and the first two seasons of Picard as being terminally dark when Deep Space Nine was dark?
mm,
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, but my position has always been there's a different kind of dark in DS9. They dabble with dark things that were not handled in Next Generation. Ira Stephen Bear described the mentality of Star Trek The Next Generation as being, as he put it, Connecticut.
mm,
Everything's proper, everything's rigid, everything is wholesome and stuff like that. And when he did Deep Space Nine, it was basically the exact opposite of that. That being said, he always goes back as a writer to some sort of growth, some sort of optimism. It doesn't completely break Roddenberry's vision. Tests it, yes. pushes the boundaries, yes, but doesn't completely break it. You mentioned earlier some of those episodes where they don't give you the rosy feeling having watched them. Pale Moonlight is the example that
Yeah,
definitely
sure.
comes to mind. But it
Rocks and
gives you,
Shoals, probably one of my favorite episodes of all time, is depressing. But,
but it
yeah,
gives you
sorry, keep going. Yeah.
it gives you something to chew on. It gives you something to
Oh, yeah.
process. It gives you something, and that's
And those are exceptions
mhm.
to the rule. Like, okay, there is no Take Me Out to the Hollow Suite. Not my favorite episode, but you know what I'm saying? Like, that
Mhm.
is the span, and there's The Visitor, which is let's all
Oh
get
God,
really
that's good.
sad. There's Take Me Out to the Hollow Suite or Bar Association, which is one of my favorites of all time, where they form a union,
Yeah, you
which
would
is,
like that one.
I swear that is a better episode and more interesting than probably anything I have seen in Trek in a minute. And that is a
Yep.
bottle episode. They did that with what they had to create or do the prosthetics for like one additional Ferengi. Otherwise, it's like, what can we do on this set again? 5, 6 seasons in. So no, it's like
Yep.
those are exceptions. Pale Moonlight is the exception to the rule.
Yep.
That's why it's so famous. Rocks and Troll is the exception to the rule. That's why it's so famous. And so good. So yeah, it's those things stand out. It's not all violent, all gritty, all
Right.
depressing, all nihilistic. Everyone is
Hmm.
corrupt. All people when you get shot, get incinerated and vaporized forever. But yeah, so there's a difference between like being dark and like talking about and thinking about dark things, like in Rocks and
Hmm.
Shoals, like thinking about, oh man, every Jem'Hadar is biologically conditioned for war. And
Oh yeah.
man, it's really a conundrum when an intelligent sentient species is addicted to this mythological understanding of the founders and can't really be reasoned with. It's like that's and like willingly go to their deaths. It's like, oh man, that's tough. But it's not like now we should all just be sad and cry like at the end of
No.
Star Trek Nemesis, and just like look
Oh yeah.
really like this is it, but good sir, Mr. G, I think we should steer our audience to that our discussion of 1 and 2. We could
All
talk
right.
maybe if our audience wants like a more of a meta commentary, I'll go watch some other Trek, but let's
The
why don't we get
only
into those strengths? Yeah, yeah, break. Yeah,
the,
what's your other idea here? And let's
the
jump into
only
those
reason
strengths.
why I brought it up is they handled Raffi in a sort of Deep Space Nine
Aha, yeah.
sort of way where they approach dark elements, but they don't commit to it. And she comes out stronger. There's growth. There's something to think about. There's investment, and
Yeah,
that's
she
what I
definitely
meant.
committed in this one. She went full
Oh God,
reject
yeah.
family, So I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Uh,
Well, she comes into her own, dabbling with dark themes, mainly addiction, which is something I've always had issues with. Um, but she finds more or less optimism or grows as a character at the end. That's my example. I was really concerned about Raffi as a character coming back because again, I did not like her at all in the first two seasons rather. But yeah, not so good there. But the improvement I've noticed also goes beyond Picard as a show and kind of focuses on maybe missed opportunities in the entire Star Trek franchise itself.
mm.
And there are missed opportunities that go all the way back to 1993 that the showrunner Terry Matalas, who worked on Berman era Trek, has decided to explore. Since you're a Deep Space Nine guy, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Um, do you get a kind of Cisco vibe from Captain Liam Shaw in terms of potential prejudice against Picard as Locutus?
Um, nah, I don't know. It's Cisco lost his wife, Shaw, to the Borg, like
Mm-hmm.
directly, and was on the
Mm-hmm.
ship and had to like make a choice to leave her body behind and then raise a son while working in an organization that you know allows for that probability. You know what I'm saying? And that's ultimately he overcomes that prejudice. That's
Yep.
kind of like that's kind of like one of the and he decides, so Cisco again. No, Cisco's not defined, in my opinion, by hating Picard. That literally is something that he overcomes in the first episode of the TV show.
Hmm.
So yeah, like yeah, people have prejudice, but then they reflect and they move on, they grow. That's part of being a character, I feel like. Yeah, sorry, you gotta input on that.
You kind of answered my question at the last part, but seeing that grow and develop and getting more thematic pay
Yeah.
dirt from that, I'm very curious about that because
Do you think?
he.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
Do I think what?
Do you think Shaw's gonna grow as a character? I just keep waiting for him to not and snap. I feel like he's gonna hint at being a good person, like he kind of did in episode two. But maybe,
Uh-huh.
maybe I don't know. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like nah, just a trick, a plot device trick.
I don't know. And that's the thing. The fact that I'm thinking about this and I have hope and expectations and I'm willing to invest this kind of energy into a show that I said after season two I'd never watch again.
Yeah, good
It's a
point.
good sign. Um, it's the credit sequence at the end of the episode. I absolutely love that credit sequence. They play the suite from First Contact, which is one of my favorite pieces of music ever. It's extremely haunting, but then they have little bits and pieces and hints, um, plot points that are hidden in Starfleet reports and LCAR systems and stuff like that. And you can
Yep.
see one right after the other, Captain Shaw's service record, a couple seconds after a report of a ship that was lost in Wolf 359. And I think there's definitely a connection there. If I know classical conditioning, and I do, you're supposed to make some kind of connection there. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll also notice that he refers to Seven of Nine as Annika Hansen.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah,
And
he probably got some Borg prejudice then, for
yeah,
sure.
got some Borg prejudice there. And I'm getting a lot of undiscovered country vibes from this because it's been pitched as next generation's equivalent of the undiscovered country, and the theme of undiscovered country was everybody getting over age-old prejudices to embrace a brighter future. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
projecting a little bit, but I'm definitely seeing that with Captain Shaw. So what are your, you have anything else that you've noticed about Shaw in particular? I'm curious. He's the cap. He took Riker's chair.
No, I don't have too much about Shaw in my notes. It's not really either a strength or struggle for me. Like I said, I think I'm going a slightly different route. I kind of more focus on the structure of the two episodes.
Okay, so what are your
But
thoughts on that?
nonetheless, yeah, didn't like I said, I don't think Shaw. I just am kind of waiting for him to, do the evil Starfleet or bad Starfleet, per thing, and then be revealed for what he is, or a proton torpedo hits and he dies. They do that, like Rachel Garrett him. Bye, you're out now. Have a good day. But Garrett wasn't a bad person. She's a good person who was like willing to sacrifice her entire crew for something big, unlike Shaw. So,
You mentioned Rachel Garrett. I'm thinking Jellicle,
oh yeah. I'm just
Captain
saying, no,
Jellicle.
not. Geez, he isn't. Shaw is not Garrett. Garrett's way cooler.
No,
Okay, let's
but
talk.
in terms of a sacrifice. But yeah, go ahead, bud.
Okay, let's talk about some structure of one and two. Um, a strength in mine is the structure of episode one. A struggle of mine is the structure of episode two. So let's start with one. Episode one, The Next Generation. It's got that action opening and sets up a mystery. Okay, I was not excited about that. It was cool to see Bev, but I was like, uh oh, here we go. Some violent, shooting everyone with assault rifles. Oh boy,
Yeah.
oh boy. But then the structure is awesome after that. It is truly adventure and trek until the very end, I would say. We get the crew, we get a plan, we risk it, we have character dialogue, we're going to different locations. It's business. It's not when Picard and Riker meet up to form this plan. It's not, I'm so sorry for everything in the
Yeah.
past. When the when you sent me to Ryza, it was truly the best thing that could ever happen to me, and I never, it wasn't that. It was like, here's a data pad. What does it mean? Let's get going. Handshake, sit over here. It was great. It was like that
Mm-hmm.
episode Gambit, which I want to bring up later.
Oh yeah.
It was great. It was great. Okay, this is the only flaw is their decision to include Starfleet in a plan where Beverly Crusher expressly says, "Trust no one." I do. Okay, I get it. I get it. You gotta get Seven in there. You gotta get a starship. We need something the fans recognize. But okay, didn't haven't we seen this before in the Search for Spock? You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's okay. So that is, I like the setup so much of one, and I like the character dialogue and the dependency on Riker and Picard. And then I thought Shaw was fine, and their decision to risk it and do the shuttle was good. At least we got away from that ship, was my feeling, and it
Mm-hmm.
truly became, kind of that adventure feeling in tone again. Not violent, not
Yep.
murder everyone, destroy everyone. A billion lasers in space. No, it's like character choices and decision. So
Oh
that
yeah.
is my big. If we're thinking about the two side by side, that is the biggest strength. I really like the setup for one. Um, I think we kind of finding different things that we like about it. But yeah, my feeling is good. And then two, I think it falls apart. So before we go to two, any other thoughts and strengths about that episode one, or any thought that you thinking about that structure? Does that feel good or feel Star Trek to you?
The one thing I would say in terms of what feels like Star Trek is definitely the writing.
Mm, mm.
There is a great scene both in episode one and also in episode two where Riker talks, and I wrote this down in my notes, peak season three of TNG form, where he doesn't take any, you know what, and
Yeah.
he's cut through it, cut and dry. At the bar in season one where they talk about the Enterprise D, your favorite ship,
Yep.
and the bartender goes, "They don't like the fat ones," and he goes, "That's a galaxy class to you. Have some
Mm,
respect," or
mm.
some such. So there's definitely that. The characters talk like they should, but the one thing that I really found fascinating, and not a lot of people I've noticed have brought this up, and Picard in particular, they use a lot of contemporary speech.
Mm.
Specifically in season one, where you have Captain Rios saying things like dude and guys and
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that. And Picard should never say guys. And he said guys in season two. And that's when my respect for the show fell off a cliff. But the speech is closer to what Trek should be. So there's a scene in the first episode where they're on the Helios, Riker and
Hmm.
Picard are, and there's music playing, and Picard says he made a compilation of music for Dr. Crusher at one point.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, he could have used contemporary language
Oh
and
yeah.
said
Sure. Sure.
playlist
Playlist,
and
mixtape. Yeah. Yeah.
or something like that, and that would have been acceptable. It's a lot better than dude, but they conscientiously did not use contemporary speech. Even though in that context it would have worked. He's like, I made a compilation of music for Beverly, and the line is because roses and chocolates couldn't do it, or I paraphrase, but that's what that is.
Mm.
Again, that kind of commitment to around the 80s, playlists weren't a thing. So we're going to write it in the same form as it was back in 1987. That's an interesting thing. Um, so that's my thoughts on the first episode. A strength about the second episode, and this ties back into my themes of improvement,
Mm.
is the idea of Picard having a son.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So that's obviously the big thing that's established in number two. Yep.
Right. And when I first heard rumors about this, my first reaction was, this has been done. It was
Yep.
done in the season 7 episode Bloodlines, which
Bloodlines. Yep.
which I
Yep.
yep, I
I
call
just
it the
rewatched
Mar
that too.
Oh, you did? Okay. I call it the Maury Povich show in space because you have this random love interest that Picard allegedly had way back when, the kid shows up. A Ferengi finds, there's a Ferengi in this one too, but a Ferengi finds this supposed son and tells Picard, I'm going to kill him. And he finds him and
That's
his
it.
person.
It's Damon Bach again.
Yeah,
It
from
it's it's
season
it,
one.
from it's this age old because you killed my son. I'm gonna get revenge. Absolutely. At least
So,
it's kind of interesting.
yeah, it's interesting. And as far as season 7 episodes go, it's one of the better
Oh, oh yeah,
ones.
it's rough in seven, but yeah.
Yeah, generally by season 7 standards, it's pretty good. But in terms of improving and actually exploring that concept, I think it's very fascinating. The first scene of episode 2, where Jack Crusher, perfect name, Jack Crusher is being boarded by Fenris Rangers, and he kind of does a swashbuckling smuggler type using charm and charisma, and I liked it a lot. But I straight up told my wife after that scene, I went, I like this guy, because I was
Okay, yeah.
extremely apprehensive at the end of the first episode, where I was like, who is this guy? He's angry, he's this and he's that, and it's very nice to see. It's almost a throwback to an earlier era in modern media, because you have a person who's suave, intelligent, and he's using these charms to do good for the world and save the refugees or whoever, the people that were dying from space disease on the planet. I like that, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that gets explored, because my first reaction was apprehension, because I think this has the potential to be a rehash of Bloodlines.
Yep. Yep.
But it's a little bit different, or perhaps going back to the main theme of my thesis is improvement. One of the reasons why Bloodlines falters is they invented a love interest out of thin air, admittedly consistent with Picard's interest. She is an archaeologist and he likes archaeology. But
Yeah.
now the mother is Beverly Crusher, and having them explore that, I'm curious. I'm cautiously optimistic about that possibility, and it plays into my theme of improvement.
Okay. Okay. So let's stay on that theme for just a moment, thinking about Jack Crusher, because I think that is my main strength of episode two as well.
Oh
I
yeah.
think that they dangle the mystery a little too long. That kind of that's annoying. I understand they probably want to open an episode and close it, and use that structure. But I mean, Riker was literally hitting Picard over the head until come on, do you get it yet? Do you get it yet? So by the time we have to do that, might as well just use other clues or acting or writing to try to convey that stuff. But in Bloodlines, I think honestly, Picard kind of does kind of have quick relationships with women, lessons, Vosh. Um, Trying to think. Oh, Insurrection.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's others, but this guy three's a pattern. Picard. What else? He doesn't have a healthy relationship example in his life, maybe, or I don't know. I don't know who can say, but I like that Picard in that episode at least decides, is kind of negotiating what kind of responsibility do I have, what kind of relationship do I want. That's kind of the crux of it. It's a little melodrama ish, but I kind of like that exploration of it. And they're not going to do that with this. There's no way he's going to kind of do a meditation on it because of the type of dramatic music they used at the end of two when he locks eyes on Crusher. It's all about heart and drama and feel. And like, to be honest, if you have a secret child with someone and have no interaction with that child for 20 years, like the best you could say you are, in my opinion, is biological father. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know how, like, you won't have any influence on this child. The nurture part of the nature thing. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and Crusher and Picard are very different people. In fact, that's what's interesting about their relationship, honestly. In many respects, like
Mhm.
there's a great episode called The High Ground where Crusher straight up defies Picard and leads to her
Yep.
capture. And, you know, it's because she has a conscience just like Picard does, but it's slightly different. It's like influenced by medical, not duty. And so just you know what I'm saying? I just don't even believe that you could even tell using context clues this would be Picard's son because it just would be raised by a very different person. No knowledge, no contact to Picard, unless he studied Picard from a distance on his laptop or something. That's kind of creepy. Why not just go say hey to dad then at some point, you know? So a strength and a struggle, in my opinion, kind of both. More of a strength for sure, but a little bit of a struggle too. I do want to talk about one other aspect of the structure, but anything else you want to say about Jack Crusher or strengths?
One of the things I also find interesting is they're attempting to make peace with the fans. And I'm going to go into that a
Okay,
little bit
sure.
more with struggles, because there's definitely a struggle that has been driving me nuts, but I'll get into that in a moment. One of the ways in which I think they're making a good attempt to make peace with the fans is they're incorporating so-called beta content into
Oh
this
yeah, yeah,
narrative.
yeah, sure.
Um, I don't know if you're familiar, but there were a series of novels that were published right after Nemesis. Between Nemesis and the reboot, there was a series of novels. It was like A Time to Die, A Time to Be Born, and it's a time to like 7 different verbs.
Mm.
And in that series, Picard and Crusher actually start formally dating, and it's not platonic. Let's just put it that way. And I kind of get some vibes about that, and maybe that might have been hinted in the time after Nemesis, but before Picard season 1, and that kind of reference is it's interesting.
Do you
It's interesting.
do you know about like the countdown graphic novels
Oh, that
before the
too.
JJ yeah,
Yeah,
before the
that
JJ
too.
verse? So like that brings Brett Spiner as a potential way back in too if Brett has is gonna play Data in B4's body. You know
Mm,
what I mean? Because I think that because in Countdown, those graphic novels, Data is the first officer or the captain of the Enterprise, if I
yep,
recall.
he is captain of the Enterprise.
He's in red. I can't remember too much about him. I read him maybe in a bookstore. I want to say it. I don't think I don't own him, but I looked through it once and that seemed kind of cool. But
I
you know,
enjoyed it.
yeah. Hey, if you have a copy, I
Hey,
want to take I take a look at
oh,
that again.
I do. I'll see if I can get it sent to you. It's digital, but I can get it sent to you.
I
That
don't know.
that
Take a look at it
that
sometime. Bring
count
it.
that countdown comic, as small as it is infinitely more entertaining than season 1 of Picard. Just
Mm.
saying. But
Yeah, I remember good things. Yeah, sorry.
one of the things I bring this up because I'm talking to a student right now. I just did an interview with them for our school newspaper about the fans' relationship with Star Wars, and I talked about how
Mm.
when you alienate fan-produced canon, that is potentially an insult. And one of the ways in which Star Wars, in particular, can repair the damage to the fans is make references to the EU, the expanded universe,
Mm.
and
Mm.
embed that into the narrative. And I kind of get that vibe with the Picard and Crusher getting together, and without Picard's knowledge having a kid, because that's what happened in the extremely short-lived beta canon series between Nemesis, on the Nemesis side of the gap between Nemesis and '09. That series got canceled. Countdown revamped the entire franchise and the entire canon as a lead into Star Trek '09. But I thought that was kind of interesting.
Okay, so let me jump into my struggle
Oh,
for
okay.
episode 2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is my thesis for this. It's a worse version of the episode from TNG, I, Borg. All right, get this, get
Oh,
this. I just could not stop thinking about I, Borg during this. So in episode 2, we start with a Jack Crusher surprise. Says his name, Boom, we got this big surprise, and there's suspense, and there's a countdown element too until the ship's going to get blown up.
Mhm.
Okay, and there's drama on the Titan. What do we do? What do we do? You're insubordinate. Nope, now you rescue us. Now you're in the brig. Okay, then we have unveiling of the villain, confirmation that, pain and suffering is about to ensue.
Mhm.
More drama on the Titan. Uh-oh, what do we do? Do we hand him over? Do we send him back? Do we send him back? And at the end of it, big dramatic love violins as Beverly, who should be in a medical coffin thing, is limping onto the bridge, and love, feelings, heart. Nope, we're not going to send Crusher over. We're getting out of here. Okay,
Okay.
I Borg. Start instead of Jack Crusher, you start with a Borg. Oh, big suspense countdown. Borger incoming. Okay, then there's
Okay.
drama on the Enterprise. What do we do with this Borg? Do we create a genocidal program and upload it to the Borg, and then have the Borg go back and kill everyone? Drama, drama, talking, drama. What do we do? Countdown. The Borg are gonna, close in any second now. But Hugh goes back
Yeah.
because he understands that running from a foe that is 10 times stronger than you is going to get everyone killed. And so he volunteers to go back. It's kind of a self sacrifice, as it were. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few style, not some sort of cowboy diplomacy like I think Shaw's like going back and forth between.
Okay.
And it's kind of one of those downer episodes, but at the same time, did not commit genocide, grew. Might be talking about improvement, right? Guinan
Mhm.
overcomes a prejudice, Picard overcomes a prejudice. We see the Borg have a weakness now. This unstoppable villain has like a weakness. They do have humanity still left in it. We already knew that Locutus, but now confirmed.
Mhm.
And I just couldn't stop thinking about like one, how kind of silly it is to have drug Starfleet into this when you weren't supposed to in the first place, and two, to you're kind of using a similar, it's an ethical dilemma. What do we do with this? We have a big enemy that can destroy us. What do we do with the thing that they're looking for? Do we send it over? That's a conscious entity. That seems kind of wrong, and then they're just making the opposite decision in the newer Picard episode. So I just, if that's just that's what you would do in a dramatic space opera. You would do what they did in Picard, but that's not what you would do in Star Trek. A science fiction
Mm,
show about moral dilemmas. Nope, you would not do that. You would solve one moral dilemma, no genocide on the Borg, with a tougher but still difficult pill to swallow, because this is a science fiction moral adventure show, not a music swelling violin space opera. Not saying either is bad. I love Star Wars, big time space opera over there, but I don't know. I just think it's simply an interesting comparison. I just could not stop thinking about Iborg the entire time.
I definitely see your point on that, and I see the parallels now that you bring them up. But honestly, if you were to borrow a plot line and disguise it, you could do worse than Iborg.
Oh, sure. No, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to. Well, it's kind of a bad
You
thing to
you
copy
just said
Iborg.
it was,
It
buddy,
is. It
but
is. It was a bad thing.
but
It's an inferior version, in my
okay,
opinion.
but if it's still compelling because I the other thing we keep focusing on Jack Crusher and excuse me, the Titan people, the Titan
Yep.
crew. But
Yep.
there's an
Yep.
entirely different plot line unfolding with Raffi, and as we discovered, Worf, which I called it when I first watched the first episode, where Raffi is talking, and it's only responses are only given in text.
Mm.
But the way in which things are written, you are a warrior, denied. This is an
Oh,
act
sure.
of
Sure.
war. I'm sitting there going, this guy's Worf. It's Worf. Come on now. Um, and it turned out to be Worf. I'm wondering if them doing that causes the two plot lines to converge. And again, not from
Oh,
the
sure.
sense that
Yeah.
this has to happen, but I'm curious to see. I don't know, and I'm very curious about that. But yes, I definitely see your point in terms of them borrowing from a plot line.
And even
It,
more than borrowing, it's just the tone. is I think that's my bigger point. It's like in one show, this story can go down as an adventure, science fiction, morality tale, and then another show you can make it drama. And I
Sure.
just think that is more of a tell about where the rest of the season is going. I think we're kind of out of that adventure mode, and we are fully swinging into drama, or we're gonna kick up the drama big time. And you know,
The,
so whether it's good or bad, we'll see. We'll see.
there is another thing that when I was at there was a Comic-Con, a local Comic-Con, and LeVar Burton came to that Comic-Con last September. And he had talked about the structure of this season and how it does 3 episode cycles.
Mm.
And I'm curious to see if that has anything to do with it, because you're saying, yes, it's all emotional and intense. Now we're done with, as you put it, the adventure stage. What's the rest of it going to be? Based on what LeVar Burton said in terms of there's basically 3 mini movies in this entire season. I'm thinking we might come back with the adventure's probably going to come back.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's very possible.
So and somebody brought this up in terms of Andor. I tried to get into Andor. I could not because it just the structure is so lax. I just really can't get into it. But anyway, they talked about Andor. I read an article recently where they, in order to keep people subscribed, they basically make 3 episodes. 1 episode sets up, second is the main conflict, 3 is the resolution, but then it feeds into the setting of the next episode, rinse and repeat, and you do that 3 times, and you got yourself a 9 or 10 episode season.
Wow, what a way
So
to that sounds like pandering to me. Okay, this
yeah,
episode is gonna sound like Star Trek. This episode is gonna sound like Discovery, and now Walking Dead, or Game of Thrones. Okay.
I don't
Let
know,
me ask you
buddy.
something. Let
Yes,
me
sir.
ask you. Let's nerd out for just another minute. I know you're crunched for time here, but last thing I want to talk about, and then whatever else is on your mind, happy to entertain. But this is something I've been thinking about. Really, why I wanted to talk to you about this too.
What's
Let's go back
that?
to the setup of first episode. Let's
Okay.
imagine that your bestie from Starfleet has sent you a coded distress message. I need you
Mm-hmm.
out here, Mr. G. I need your help.
Mm-hmm.
Trust no one. Okay, I'm curious. How would you get from the Alpha Quadrant or Earth, presumably wherever you're living in Federation space? How would you get from there to that distress signal, which is presumably neutral zone, wild space, something that's slightly dangerous, off the beaten path? How would you do it? Would you hijack a ship, or would you take another route? What do you think?
So, okay. Regarding that in context, okay, what Beverly Crusher says in that clip, I'm able to forgive this potential plot hole for one reason. She says Hellbird. And apparently Hellbird is in reference to something that allegedly occurred when he was Locutus, which means he would
Yes.
not know what Hellbird is, so therefore he would have to talk to someone on the ship who knows what Hellbird is in order to get the
Yes.
proper coordinates. So I'm kind of getting if we go by the book like Lieutenant Savick, hours may seem like days kind of thing. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not taking what she says at face value because of the fact that she says and emphasizes a code word that Picard, because this was revealed when he was Locutus, would not know what that is. Therefore, naturally, he would have to talk to someone from his past, his first officer, who would know what that is. No Starfleet, okay. Technically, I get this vibe. The Titan A is on a shakedown cruise. It's not on active duty.
Sure. Yeah.
So you have the former captain of a ship visiting visiting the newest iteration of his old ship to give it a send-off on a shakedown cruise. He makes a request to Captain Shaw. You have a little bit of drama built in where you have the new captain versus the old captain. One of the biggest criticisms about New Trek is that Starfleet does not act like a military organization with structure and discipline and stuff like that. And despite his flaws, Shaw serves as a reminder to the audience that this is a military system. There is a chain of command, and he straight up says there are people here who have pay grade. I'm following on orders. I paraphrase. I'm following orders from people whose pay grades outrank all of us in this room. Himself, Picard, Riker, and Seven of Nine. So with that said, I'm able to forgive that because I don't take what she says at face value. I think it's a sort of code because the message itself is encoded. And by mentioning something that Picard would have absolutely no way of knowing, this is her way of saying, get the band back together, or at least get Riker. And no Starfleet, fine, but we come help me. And Riker uses his resources to make that happen. That I'm able to forgive that because
so you're saying that you would go with that plan. You like the idea. If your buddy was out there, and your old love, your old flame out there in space, maybe, whatever you want to think about it.
don't
You
tell my
think this
wife this.
Yeah, exactly. But
I'm
I'm just saying, putting
joking.
yourself
I'm
in the
joking.
character's shoes, you would go with this plan. If you're Picard and Riker says, this is what we should do, you're going to nod along and say, like, yes, I like this idea. This is our best idea.
It's either
Remember
that
when,
or that.
remember
It's
when
either
Picard would
that
call people in and be like, recommendations, suggestions? Yeah. Like he'd listen to everyone's plan. It's like, okay, let's go with the first one.
he kind of did that in the bar with Riker, kind of. But that said, it's either that or use the Sirena, that or something like that. And if he knows that Beverly Crusher's in trouble, La Sirena is not going to be able to handle it. La Sirena is on assignment anyway, but I can forgive that. I really can. And also as a matter of agency, and he does attempt to try this, and in the second episode, he does more or less get away with this. He outranked Shaw. Admittedly, he's retired, but if we're going to talk chain of command, he does have the authority to say, I want to do this for reasons that you don't need to know about.
Yeah, and that was my other thing. It was like either go with subterfuge or go with hard diplomacy. Okay, I beg you, ask me what I would do. Ask me what I would do. I beg
What
you, my
would you
friend.
do? What would you do?
Thank you so much for asking. I would not involve Starfleet. I think that's a terrible idea. I would go with any of those smuggling organizations that we've seen, and I try to go to make it dark instead of violent and gritty. Let's go like more Gambit speed. I rewatched that one, and let's get ourselves in on like a pirate crew or a smuggling crew, maybe even like on the outside it looks like a good like Cassidy Yates in Deep Space Nine, but actually I'm running some replicators or something like that, whatever it was, to the Maquis, or hit up that salvage yard they went to in Gambit. Let's pick up a ship. We'll put one upgrade into it, and then we'll have to really use our intellect and our cleverness to outmaneuver whatever's out there. Anyways, I just like the idea of them kind of let's get the band together, like you were saying, like, okay, this code word must mean something, which is also infuriating because like we were with Riker and Shelby, shouldn't we have heard Hallberg? Like we were there. We were there.
Well, you bring up Gambit. I honestly thought the Hellbird thing was in reference to Gambit, and that came up off screen.
Oh.
That's what I thought, but then they mentioned the Borg. When they first said Hellbird, and there's this dramatic pause where he goes, yeah, you were off ship or incapacitated or such, because there was also that episode where Picard gets abducted and his imposter comes back.
Oh yeah, I love that.
I forget which episode that was, where he starts singing sea shanties and then forward.
Yes.
The imposter does.
Yes. What is that one called? And he like goes to like this room where it's like a puzzle, and that's the B plot or something like that.
I thought
Imposters maybe is what it's called.
I think that's what it was. So we'll just call it imposters for the sake of discussion. I thought they were referencing that episode. The fact that it's Picard, okay, fine. in terms of your plan, I love it, but as a producer, I can understand and forgive the choice that they made for this one reason. The biggest argument that people have, the biggest criticism is that Star Trek doesn't feel like Star Trek.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and it's also called Allegiance is the name of the episode, not
Oh,
Imposter.
Allegiance.
Way off. My
Okay.
bad. My
All
bad.
good.
Anyways, yes,
All good.
yes.
But
Okay, so it wouldn't feel like Trek on a
it would
smuggler
not
ship or
feel
something
like
like that. Yeah.
Trek on a smuggler ship. If they had for the first two seasons established the kind of Trek we're getting now, where we talk about a starship, chain of command, life, space adventures and stuff like that, a producer would be more inclined to do something like that. But this is an existential crisis for Star Trek right now. And
I would.
that
Okay, what if you just use that to get to Beverly's ship and then put it on Beverly's ship, which is very Star Trek feely. You know.
or 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 maybe taking a step further, they use a freighter, get to Beverly's ship, they're in trouble, and the Enterprise F comes in and bails them out. They could
Gosh,
do that too.
bingo. Yeah, yeah. What do you make? I'm sorry. While we're talking about this kind of setup where we see Beverly's ship, what do you make of the tractor beam throwing a ship thing? To me, that didn't seem that out of the realm of something you could have done with TNG era tech.
It seems that
Like
again, I gave it a
seemed fine. Everyone seemed so
it's
shocked, but I was like, yeah, you could definitely move physical
oh yeah.
objects in space with a tractor
It,
beam and use it as a weapon. Yeah,
well, it's fun and it's clever, and they do this because, and I want to quickly wrap this up because
yeah,
I
yeah.
have
You know it. You
kids
know it.
who
You
want
know
to
it.
meet me for progress reports. Paramount is throwing everything they can at this, it seems, by
Yeah.
investing in special effects and stuff like that, because it's double or quits for Star Trek right now. We are at a point right now where the backlash has been so bad and the damage inflicted by showrunners who went out of their way, looking at you, Michael Chabon, to antagonize fans. The damage is so bad right now. If this is not a success, it might be all over.
Sure.
It might be all over. And it's one of those things where,
But like TOS failed
well,
in many
TO,
respects, and then it found its footing else. I don't know. Like, I don't know. It
the
seems kind of.
but the fans kept it alive, and that's the
This,
difference between TOS failing and this new iteration of Star Trek failing. The reason why TOS was able to survive and be one of the longest running pop culture franchises ever is
mm-hmm.
the fans saved it, and the content provided was generational in the sense that you did not have to be of a certain age to be able to watch it without experiencing trauma.
Also, like a
Um,
producer showrunner who just kind of knew, you
yep.
know,
So
Roddenberry kind of knew.
my question for you then becomes, okay, in reference to your tractor beam question. The reason why that hasn't been done in the past is probably as a matter of budget and the effects. It costs too much money to animate that and use ILM to
Hmm.
convincingly make that effect happen. This is double or nothing. They're going nuts. They're spending as much money as they can on effects and talent and things along those lines to make it work. To
I just
say,
think not a criticism, not a criticism. I think it's cool. I'm just curious why it hadn't been done before, and just kind
well,
of curious what you thought. And I appreciate your explanation. Remember that time they used the tractor beam to move a moon in that cute
yes.
episode?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
not a bad thing, not a bad thing. Just
No,
an
but
observation. Thought it was interesting.
moving a moon is a lot more cost effective than moving a
Also didn't work.
spaceship.
Also didn't
Yeah,
work.
and it
They
also
needed
didn't
Q's
work.
help in the end.
So real quick, my questions for you, buddy.
Sure. Yeah.
There is a major. It's kind of like a Kobayashi Maru. It's a no-win scenario for Star Trek fans of our generation who have had such struggle with modern Trek, if not outright disdain in my case for certain seasons. there is discussion right now where individuals, personalities on YouTube, social media say, so what if it's good? Don't watch it. You're only encouraging them. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of a vote with your dollar mentality, and I'm not really it sounds like you're individualizing the problem. You're taking something that is created by people with millions of dollars, or they're trying to make a product worth billions, and you're saying that yeah, it's the individual consumer's job to. I mean, no, I don't really think so. I don't. I think what they're doing, they have some sort of calculus or formula that says, based on this amount of popularity from search engine or something like that, or Twitter, this number of people are thinking about Star Trek. We're willing to put this much money in. I honestly don't think individual views. I don't. If they cared about individual views and they wanted to use that, they would release all the information they have about it, and they don't.
No, they
I,
don't.
so I don't know. Blaming the individual viewer, no, and especially YouTube personalities. There are critics. Like, shouldn't they be looking at it and breaking it down? And if anyone watching it, shouldn't it be them?
Sure.
Um, but yeah, dude. Then what do you say? Like everything from J.J. Abrams on, or when do we start this whole trek or this train of don't watch it with the new
Mhm.
TNG movie or the old TNG movies after they blew up the Enterprise and like for nothing because models are already made and we
Or,
want a better ship
yep.
that's 47 decks or 27. We don't even know, you know. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it's fine to take a look. You had to convince me to go back and watch two, and ultimately I made the decision to not
Um,
watch Discovery on
there you
my own.
go.
So we all make our own choices, and like, don't let
For,
someone on YouTube tell you what to watch.
for the
Make your own.
benefit of our listeners, if you're listening this far, first of all, thank you.
Yes,
Secondly,
yes.
full context for me recommending you watch two, because I don't want whoever's listening to
Oh,
this to
yes,
have
yes. No,
a
please, please, please. Yes, yes.
dropping opinion of me because I allegedly recommended season two. I said if you wanted to review season
Yes,
two,
yes. Art critic style. Yes,
art critic
yes.
style, I did not endorse season two. I
Yes, for
am,
the record, Mr.
however,
G is not endorsing season two. Yes.
yes, I am at least at present. History will make fools of us all, but I am at least at present endorsing the first two episodes of Picard
Yeah.
of this new season because it's pretty good. It generally feels like Star Trek. It gets meta in ways where it doesn't break the experience, but there are jabs. There's an entire monologue that Shaw does where he, you know, calls out all the flaws of the Star Trek The Next Generation movies, including and especially Generations, the movie that you despise. And
Horrible film.
it's generally good, and a lot of people and a lot of individuals whose opinions I respect. Robert Meyer Burnett is my favorite example of this. He's actually done public history with the cast of Next Generation. He was one of the first people to say, I've seen them all and it's good. And a lot of the things he hinted at, I'm seeing and I'm thinking is good.
Hmm.
So I'm thinking they're all good. So it's a good time. Now, whether we continue with this in episodes, that's up to you, the audience. Please let us know if you'd like to hear more about this. Let us know your favorite iteration of Trek. We'll infinite diversity and infinite combinations. If you like Discovery, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you can't like it. I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that. What is it about Discovery or Lower Decks or even Prodigy? I haven't seen a single frame of Prodigy, but what is it about Star Trek that you folks find interesting?
All right, it's been real, my friend. Thank
Oh,
you.
yes,
And as always, live long and prosper, peace, and long life.
you bet. Thank you all, folks. Hopefully, see you next time. Hope you enjoyed that video. Many thanks to the students who helped make this video possible. And if you enjoyed this video and haven't already, please subscribe and share this video with other people who might enjoy it. I'd absolutely love to see Sci-Fi High School grow in numbers. With that said, till next time.